Imagine this, a huge, windswept landscape in ancient Spain. For the longest time, experts thought early humans just skipped this whole area for thousands of years after the Neanderthals vanished, left it empty. Now picture just one rock shelter, kind of unassuming, that's turning that whole story on its head. It's making us rethink everything about human ingenuity back then. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into a really fascinating study from a site called Abrigo de la Malia, right in the heart of central Iberia. For decades, the standard view was that the interior of Spain, the Meseta, was basically empty of modern humans. All the action, all the archaeological finds seemed to be huddles along the coasts. But Malia, it's not just questioning that idea. It feels like it's actually flipping the script on decades of thinking. So our mission today is to explore how these early modern humans, anatomically modern humans, weren't just there, but were actually making a go of it, thriving in this supposedly empty zone. And get this, for 10,000 years, we're talking roughly 36,200 down to about 26,260 years ago. We'll try to unpack what their lives were like, what they were hunting, and crucially, how they managed to adapt to a climate that was always changing, often pretty tough. For this deep dive, we're drawing on a detailed paper in Quaternary Science Advances, and also a really helpful article called Iberian Peninsula's First Human Hunters. All right, let's get into it, and maybe rethink early human expansion a bit. Okay, so let's really unpack this. This long-held idea about central Iberia being, well, a blind spot for early modern humans. Why did everyone think it was so empty for so long?
Well, it's kind of a classic archaeological situation, Where you look dictates what you find. For years and years, the big digs, the main focus was all on the coasts. You had the Cantabrian coast, Mediterranean, the Portuguese Atlantic coast. That's where the known early Upper Paleolithic sites were concentrated. Lots of evidence there.
Right, so that's where the attention went.
Exactly. And because there weren't major finds popping up inland, this assumption grew that the Meseta, the big interior plateau, was just sort of abandoned after the Neanderthals. People figured modern humans didn't really move back in until much later, maybe around 20,000 years ago, towards the end of the last ice age. It created this idea of a population void.
So almost like a feedback loop. No finds, so no looking, which means no finds.
Pretty much. And it wasn't just about where they looked, it also maybe fostered certain assumptions about what early modern humans could or would do.
Oh, okay. What kind of assumptions are we talking about?
Well, it sort of implied maybe they preferred the coasts. Or perhaps they were limited, couldn't handle the interior conditions, which were sometimes seen as harsher.
I see. So Malia really throws a wrench in that.
It really does.
Oh, yeah.
What's so important about Abrigo de la Malia, this site in Guadalajara, is that it gives us the first really solid, undeniable proof of anatomically modern humans settling right there inland. And we're talking about the Aurignation and Gravetian periods. These are some specific early cultural phases for Homo sapiens in Europe.
Yeah, early phases.
Yeah. Known for particular stone tool technologies and art styles. So finding them inland this early, it doesn't just poke holes in the population void idea.
Yeah.
It forces a fundamental rethink about how mobile these first Homo sapiens were, how they occupied different landscapes, and how adaptable they really were. We basically wrote off this whole region too soon.
Wow. Okay, so not just a minor tweak to the timeline, but a real shift in understanding.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a quick visit, right? This was sustained presence.
Over a huge span of time, yeah.
So what was life actually like at Malia? How did they manage it? Because the environment wasn't exactly a walk in the park, was it?
Not at all. The whole time they were using Malia falls within what climate scientists call marine isotopic stage 3, or MIS3. This was a period globally known for pretty significant climate swings. Generally, it was cooling down, landscapes were opening up, becoming less forested, and there were several quite dry spells across Iberia. So, yeah, definitely challenging.
And Malia itself wasn't static either, right? The local climate changed quite a bit during those 10,000 years. Let's start with the earlier period, LUV. That's about 36,000 to 32,000 years ago.
That's right, lithostratigraphic unit V. And the evidence from that time paints a picture of a, well, relatively more humid landscape compared to what came later. You had forested areas, probably oak woodlands based on the charcoal we found, mixed with meadows. The tiny animal bones microvertebrates back this up.
What kind of tiny animals?
Things like snow voles, certain types of microcyst voles at like moist grassy areas, but also woodland critters like the garden dormouse and field mice. It suggests a mix of habitats.
Okay.
And interestingly, we also find the yellow-billed chough. It's a bird usually found high in the mountains today, but its presence back then suggests maybe an expansion of open, rocky areas too, even during this generally moister phase.
So a varied landscape, challenging maybe, but with resources.
Exactly. The researchers talk about ecological windows of opportunity. Even in a tough, broader climate, there were periods or places where resources were more available, and these early humans clearly knew how to find and exploit them.
But then things got tougher. Moving into the later period, LUAV from about 32,500 down to 26,000 years ago.
Yeah, LUIV shows a pretty clear climatic downturn. It got drier, colder, the environment shifted more towards open, steppe-like conditions. We see fewer signs of those warmer climate forests and more evidence for pines and grasses dominating the landscape. Definitely more rigorous conditions.
Which makes their continued presence even more impressive.
Absolutely. It highlights their adaptability.
So let's talk about that adaptability in action. How do they eat? What were their hunting strategies like? You said they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Expert hunters.
That's where the animal bones, the zooarchaeology, tells a fascinating story. We looked at over 1,000 identifiable bone fragments, and the evidence is really clear. They were heavily focused on medium and large hoofed animals, ungulates. And crucially, the signs point to active hunting, not just scavenging leftovers.
Okay, so who was on the menu? What animals specifically?
It was pretty diverse, which again speaks to their flexibility. In the earlier, slightly woodier LUV period, red deer was quite common. Wild horses were consistently hunted throughout both periods. Later on in LUIV, we see evidence of bison.
Bison, too. Wow.
Yeah, and even roe deer shows up later. And remember that chamois from the earlier period? That's a mountain animal.
Right, the chamois.
It shows they weren't just sticking to the immediate area around the shelter. They were venturing into nearby mountainous terrain for specific prey. It's a really versatile hunting approach.
That's amazing. What about smaller stuff, like rabbits? Were they part of the diet?
That's a really interesting point. Rabbits or leporids were actually abundant at the site, especially in that earlier LUV level. But, and this is key, none of the rabbit bones showed any signs of human modification. No cut marks, no burning patterns consistent with cooking.
So they weren't eating them.
It doesn't look like it, not at this site anyway. The interpretation is that these smaller animals were probably brought in by other carnivores, like foxes maybe, or just died naturally in the shelter. Humans were focused on the big game here.
Okay, that distinction is important. How can we be so sure they were hunting the big game themselves and not just finding carcasses?
The taphonomy, the study of how bones get modified after death, gives us really strong clues. We found lots of cut marks from stone tools on the bones of the deer, horses, and bison.
Marks from butchering.
Exactly. Consistent with defleshing, skinning for instance, specific marks on the lower leg bones, the metapodials, suggest how they were skinning them. We also see percussion marks from breaking bones open, likely to get at the rich marrow inside. And many bones were burned in ways that suggest cooking or managing waste.
Yep.
Plus, the way the bones were broken, what we call green fractures, indicates they were broken while fresh, not after they'd been lying around for ages.
And not much sign of other predators getting there first.
Very little, actually. On the big ungulate bones, carnivore tooth marks or signs of digestion are rare. It really suggests humans had primary access. They were the main players getting these animals.
That paints such a clear picture. They weren't just scraping by, they were skilled, strategic hunters accessing prime resources.
Definitely. It underlines their proficiency. This wasn't specialization on just one animal type. It was this notable versatility, drawing resources from forests, open plains, even mountains.
It really shows a deep understanding of their environment, doesn't it? Being able to tap into all these different ecological zones.
It absolutely does. A profound environmental knowledge, honed over generations.
Okay, so they're skilled hunters using this area repeatedly. What about the nature of those occupations? Were they setting up long-term villages like maybe you'd find on the coast, or was it something else?
That's another key piece of the puzzle. If we look at the bigger picture of how people moved around then, Malia doesn't look like a permanent home base. The evidence points much more towards it being used for short but repeated visits over that whole 10,000-year period.
Like a base camp for hunting trips.
Something like that. Likely focused specifically on hunting expeditions and doing the initial butchering and processing of the animals they caught. This fits into what archaeologists call a logistical mobility system. Groups move around, but they have specific spots they return to for particular tasks, like a hunting camp or a quarry site. Malia seems to fit that pattern.
Interesting. What evidence specifically suggests these were short, repeated stays rather than settling down?
Well, a few things. First, the overall density of artifacts isn't super high, considering the time span, and the animal bones, especially the long bones, are highly fragmented.
Which suggests.
It suggests intensive processing, like smashing bones for marrow, happened quickly, maybe before moving on, rather than the kind of gradual accumulation you might see in a long-term camp.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else?
Yeah, the stone tools, the lithics, they don't show much sign of extensive tool making at the site. It looks more like people were bringing in tools that were already made, or maybe just doing final touch-ups.
Bringing their toolkit with them.
Right. We even found part of an assegai that's a type of spear point, this one made from deer antler. Fits perfectly with a hunting toolkit brought to the site. And while they did find a couple of small hearths in the later LUIV period, associated with burned and cut bones definite activity areas for processing food, there wasn't really evidence of large structured living spaces or extensive domestic areas you might expect in a more permanent settlement.
So it contrasts with some of those bigger coastal sites.
It does. It looks more like other specialized short-term sites we know from the early Upper Paleolithic, places like Cova Eros or Cova delle Maladettes. It gives us a more complex picture of how Homo sapiens used the landscape, not just big base camps, but also these targeted logistical sites.
So Malia isn't just filling a gap on the map, it's showing us a different way early humans were living and moving in Iberia.
Exactly. It adds a crucial layer to our understanding of their mobility and resource management strategies.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit then. What's the big takeaway? What's the enduring legacy of this Malia discovery?
Well, first and foremost, it fundamentally challenges, maybe even overturns, that old idea of a population void in interior Iberia during this key time. It pushes back the date for when we know modern humans were recurrently present inland, back into the Aurignation period. That's significantly earlier than the Proto-Solutrean, which used to be the marker for the earliest widespread inland presence.
So rewriting that part of the human expansion story in Europe.
Pretty much. It's a major adjustment to the timeline and the map of early human settlement.
And beyond just when and where, what does it tell us about these people?
I think it powerfully illustrates their incredible adaptive capacity, their resilience. They weren't just surviving in these environments, sometimes perceived as marginal or resource poor. They were successfully colonizing and exploiting them, developing strategies to thrive, even as the climate, through some serious challenges their way over thousands of years. It's a real testament to their ingenuity.
It really makes you reconsider what challenging even meant to them.
Absolutely. And that has broader implications. This research really prompts archaeologists, anthropologists, all of us, to reconsider the models we use for how early humans exploited environments. And it makes you wonder about population dynamics back then, too. It highlights that other regions we currently think of as maybe peripheral or little explored could hold similar surprises.
So there could be other Malias out there, waiting to be found.
It's very possible. It's a fantastic reminder that the archaeological record is always incomplete, and new discoveries can dramatically shift our understanding.
So recapping our deep dive into Abrigo de la Malia, it's revealed this truly captivating story. Early modern humans were not absent from central Iberia. Far from it. They were resourceful, highly adaptable hunters making strategic, repeated visits to exploit a diverse and changing landscape for, remarkably, over 10,000 years. Their ability to make a go of it, to thrive, despite those fluctuating and often harsh climate conditions, really does showcase their incredible ingenuity and resilience. And that brings us to a final thought for you to consider. Malia shows us that even in places we might perceive as empty or uninhabitable, human innovation and adaptability could foster not just brief survival, but a sustained, successful presence. So think about this. What other empty spots on our maps, maybe in different parts of the world, different periods, might just be holding similar secrets? Secrets waiting to challenge our assumptions about where early humans went, what they were capable of, and just how deep their resilience ran. This discovery is a powerful reminder, isn't it? The past is always richer, always more complex than we currently imagine, and it's constantly inviting us to look again and to look deeper.